With the NFL draft and most of free agency in the rearview mirror, it's that time of year to discuss which teams have improved the most heading into the 2025 season. And when teams report to training camp, the goal for each and every NFL team is simple, and that's to win the Super Bowl. But as we know, Rome wasn't built in a day, and it takes a lot to build a championship-winning football team. And in today's video, we're going to break down the most improved teams from Week 18 of the 2024 season to where we are today. Now, a few things that are important to note regarding today's video is this does not mean every team in today's video is bound to go to the conference championship game or even the Super Bowl this year, but it is to note how much they improved their roster over the last few months. And I will also say that there were a lot of teams that made quite a bit of progress this offseason, and there will be not just one, but several honorable mentions at the end of the video, and we all know why we're here, so without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video with the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers finished the 2024 season with a 5-12 record and looked like a completely different team by the end of the year relative to how they played at the beginning of the year. The Panthers started the 2024 season with two 20-plus point losses, and this looked like it was going to be a complete disaster of a season. But they played in several competitive games down the stretch, and they had a 4-5 record in their final 9 games of the year. And this was a big offseason for Carolina because in a lot of ways, it was a now or never mentality. They had helped out their former number 1 overall pick in Bryce Young, who played well down the stretch and looked like he was the Alabama version of himself. But what got lost within the Panthers' 2025 offseason plans, aside from acknowledging that Bryce Young looked a lot better in the final 10 games of the year, was just how bad their defense was. Carolina finished dead last in several categories defensively in 2024, including points allowed, yards allowed, passing touchdowns allowed, rushing yards allowed, and yards per carry. And I know the initial thought to the rushing part may be, well, they were down a lot, so naturally teams are going to run the football on them, especially early in the year when Carolina was more or less out of the game by halftime. And I get it. That is very valid, and there is some truth to it. But losing defensive tackle Derek Brown early in the year was critical for the Panthers, and despite finishing the 2023 season with a 2-15 record and having a point difference of minus 180, believe it or not, they finished 12th in average yards per carry against. It's not as simple as losing Derek Brown in week 1 equals losing 20 spots in average yards per carry against, because there's a lot more that goes into it, but the point is, Carolina desperately needed defensive help entering this offseason. This was a unit that was depleted of talent, and they addressed the defense in a big way throughout free agency and the draft. They brought in guys along the defensive line like Tershawn Wharton and Bobby Brown, and also brought in Patrick Jones from Minnesota to help get after the quarterback. And in the secondary, they signed safety Trayvon Merrick from the Raiders, and brought back corner Michael Jackson too. I don't think the Panthers are going to go from the worst defense in the NFL to a top 5 unit by any means, but these are noticeable changes from where they were a year ago. And they also brought in 2 edge rushers in the first 3 rounds of the draft in Texas A&M's Nick Scorton and Ole Miss's Princely Umanmielen. I thought the Panthers received tremendous value with Scorton and Umanmielen, and that this defense should be a lot more efficient at getting after the quarterback in 2025. They couldn't get after the quarterback consistently in 2024 for several reasons, and ultimately they didn't have depth at pass rush either. We all watched the Super Bowl and how much a good pass rush and ultimately defensive line can control football games, and Carolina significantly improved their defense this offseason. They also brought in Rico Dowdle, who had 1,000 yards last year for just $2.75 million, which is a very low-risk signing, and also drafted Tetairoa McMillan with the 8th overall pick. I like McMillan a lot and really like the idea of him and Xavier Legette as a duo moving forward. Now, just because we included Carolina in today's video does not make me think they are headed to the Super Bowl next year, but I think it's more than fair to say they are one of the most improved teams heading into 2025. Next up is the New England Patriots, who found themselves in a similar, though not exact situation as the Carolina Panthers entering the 2025 offseason, and one of the biggest things the Patriots knew they needed to do entering the 2025 offseason was help out quarterback Drake May. His top 6 leading receivers last year were Hunter Henry, Pop Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, Austin Hooper, Kendrick Bourne, and Antonio Gibson. And whether your quarterback was a rookie Drake May, or whether it was a prime Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or whoever, that that was always going to limit the success of the quarterback, and not surprisingly, the Patriots finished 30th in points per game last year. Their offensive line was also horrendous, and I do want to credit Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson, as I thought they played above what should have been expected from those guys last year, but the offensive line was not good, and they definitely set Drake May up to fail, not just once, but several times, and even Jacoby Brissett for that matter too. The offense being as bad as they were also hindered the defense, because they couldn't sustain drives to the level that they wanted to, and when you cannot play complementary football, obviously that is going to limit what you can do as a team, and that's going to limit your potential. Throw in the fact that the Patriots defense only committed 12 turnovers, or only forced 12 turnovers in 17 games, and it was a recipe for a 4-13 season. Now, when we talked about the Patriots offense finishing 30th in points per game and not being able to play true complementary football the way a Mike Vrabel-led team will want to play complementary football, does not mean the Patriots defense last year was the 85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens by any stretch of the imagination, because they certainly weren't, and there's a reason they spent over $200 million in free agency by bringing in guys like Milton Williams, Carlton Davis, Harold Landry, and Robert Spillane. And I'll be honest, I was not the biggest fan of the Harold Landry signing, but in the absolute worst case, New England can get out of that signing after 2 years, and the biggest thing with the Harold Landry signing is it's not like they're not going to be able to pay anybody specifically because they signed Harold Landry. They also brought in Stephon Diggs in free agency, and while in theory they did overpay for Stephon Diggs, I don't think that's the end of the world, because that is at worst a 1-year contract, and Diggs is also going to be 32 years old and is coming off of a torn ACL, so New England is not dumb, and they also knew that they needed to upgrade their receiving room, which at minimum Stephon Diggs will provide. Not only did I like what the Patriots did in free agency, but they were only one of 3 teams that I gave an A+ draft grade to. The other were the Panthers and the Seahawks. Will Campbell is a really good offensive line prospect. I personally like him a little more at left guard than I do at left tackle, but at minimum he is a floor-raising player, and that is what the Patriots needed along their offensive line, was a guy who can set the standard and basically say, get on my level or get out of the way, and that's what I think Will Campbell is going to do. You see the emotion, you see the passion that he has in interviews, and you also see it on tape. He is a really good football player that I personally prefer a left guard, but we'll see how he does if he kicks out the left tackle during his rookie season. Regardless, I really do like the selection because of where it raises the Patriots offensive line's floor too. They also selected Travion Henderson, Kyle Williams, and Jared Wilson inside the top 100, and the biggest thing for the Patriots entering the 2025 draft, and I was curious to see how they were going to attack this problem, was how can we help out our young quarterback who is aspiring to be a franchise quarterback and aspiring to be the guy to lead our franchise for the next 5 to 7, maybe even 10 plus years, and they did exactly that. But it wasn't just an offensive-centric draft either. I really liked a couple of their day 3 selections, specifically in Craig Woodson, the DB from Cal, and Braden Swinson, the edge from LSU. I had Braden Swinson inside my top 45 draft prospects, and they selected him past the 140 mark, and Braden Swinson was a player that led the SEC in pressures last year and also had double-digit sacks. All things considered, whether it was free agency or the draft, the Patriots absolutely killed it this offseason, and to me, they are one of the biggest winners of the 2025 offseason. From New England to Chicago, we go to discuss a dynasty in the making, and it's the several-time defending offseason champion Chicago Bears. I figured people will make comments about it, so I should probably just get ahead and acknowledge the offseason champion part in the beginning. Now, the Bears finished the 2024 season with a 5-12 record, and were pretty disappointing all things considered. Entering last year, I really didn't think it was out of the question for this team to make the playoffs as a wild card team. Now, I certainly didn't think they would win the division last year, as I thought that Detroit was going to win the NFC North and ultimately go to the Super Bowl. But the Bears won 4 of their final 6 games in 2023 and allowed just 20 points once in that time frame. And given that they brought in Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, and even traded for Keenan Allen entering 2024, and were moving on from former offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, well, I thought this team could make some noise. And they technically did, but not for the reasons you want. The Hail Mary in Washington was a disaster that sent this team spiraling, and the loss on Thanksgiving Day to the Lions summarized the embarrassment for the 2024 Bears, prompting the organization to fire a coach mid-season for the first time in their 100-plus year franchise history. Caleb Williams was also sacked 68 times, which was by far the most in the NFL, and GM Ryan Poles knew he needed to make some changes. One of the biggest reasons I will be buying in with the Bears again is because of who their head coach is. They brought in Ben Johnson from the division rival Lions, and I thought this was a tremendous hire. That's obviously not a groundbreaking take by any means, but to have a great offensive mind and then to trade for guys like Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson, as well as bringing in Drew Dalman in free agency, were all great moves by the Bears as they look to protect Caleb Williams in 2025 and beyond. They also brought in Dayo Odeyingbo from the Colts to help out the pass rush, and while Odeyingbo is not a household name, he did have over 40 pressures last year for the Colts and should be a floor-raising player for Chicago. And what I also think needs to be remembered is not every signing or trading every team makes is going to be a league-altering decision. In an ideal world, Odeyingbo has another 40-plus pressure season as well as 7 sacks and is a solid pass rusher for Chicago. Not an all-pro, not a guy that will end up in the Bears' Ring of Honor, but a solid player who can be a secondary pass rusher that, again, is a floor-raising player. They also brought in Grady Jarrett in free agency, and Jarrett is certainly not the player he was in his prime a couple of years ago, but like Odeyingbo, this is another floor raiser and a guy who can play a lot of snaps for Chicago, as he played all 17 games last year for Atlanta and has played 17 games in 3 of the past 4 years. They also drafted Colston Loveland with the 10th pick in the 2025 draft, as well as Luther Burden in the 2nd round, both of whom I had in my top 20 in my final big board. The only problem I see with the Loveland and Burden selections, and I say this with air quotations around the word problem, is there's only one ball to go around. But their head coach is a guy who just called plays for an offense that had a quarterback throw for 37 touchdowns, a running back who went for over 1,900 total yards and 20 total touchdowns, and if not one, but 2 1,000-yard receivers, as well as another running back go for 12 touchdowns in David Montgomery. I know it's cliche with the Bears winning the offseason, and I get it, and I acknowledge that, but they are doing everything right from a franchise standpoint, and I absolutely love where this team is headed. From Chicago to Minneapolis, we go to discuss the Minnesota Vikings, who, to the surprise of everyone, won 14 games in 2024, and not to the surprise of really anyone, came up short as they lost in the wildcard round with a score of 27-9. It was an up-and-down season for the Vikings, as they started out 5-0, then dropped back-to-back games to the Lions and Rams, then won 9 straight to enter Week 18 with a 14-2 record, only to lose Week 18 to the Lions by 20-plus points, and then to the Rams in the wildcard round, which ended their season. They had a decision this offseason. Would they bring back Sam Darnold for one more year and have 2024 first-round pick J.J. McCarthy sit for another season and bring back the guy who just threw for 4,300 yards and 35 touchdowns, or would they roll with the highest selected quarterback in franchise history? And as we know now, they are rolling with J.J. McCarthy. One of the biggest reasons as to why the Vikings fell short in 2024 was the interior offensive line play, and of course Sam Darnold had his part as he saw ghosts in the final 2 games of the year, but the interior offensive line was also pretty bad, and that was really noticeable in the Week 18 game against Detroit, and especially against a great pass rushing team in the Los Angeles Rams. They traded Ed Ingram, who was a 2nd-round pick back in 2022, who is not a good starting caliber right guard, and they released 2019 first-round pick Garrett Bradbury, and brought in guys like Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, and 2025 first-round pick Donovan Jackson. The Minnesota Vikings front office and coaching staff, like everyone, saw the Eagles absolutely dismantle the Chiefs in Super Bowl 59, and they did not want J.J. McCarthy to have to go through what both Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold have went through over the past 6 years as the Vikings starting quarterback, and not have a strong interior offensive line in front of him. And I do not think it is an exaggeration to say, before J.J. McCarthy makes his first career NFL start, that this is the best supporting cast ever for a player's first career start when you factor in the running backs, receivers, and especially the receivers, the offensive line, the tight ends, and ultimately the coaching staff before a quarterback makes his first career start. Not his 17th start or his 47th start, but his first career NFL start. Now that is an entirely different conversation, but the point is for the Vikings front office to build the interior offensive line up and also to have Christian Darrisaw back, which will be absolutely huge for this offense, is critical for the 2025 Vikings success. But it didn't just stop there. They had a little trouble rushing the passer from the interior last season, as Harrison Phillips is a good run-stuffing defensive tackle, but he doesn't provide the most upside as a pass-rushing defensive tackle, so they went out and brought in Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen in free agency, both of which to me are low-risk, high-reward signings. Obviously, everyone knows about Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard and Dallas Turner, and I can't wait to see how those guys play in 2025, but adding 2 guys along the interior who, again, are low-risk, high-reward forward signings was a great job by general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. The Vikings also brought back corner Byron Murphy, they brought in corner Isaiah Rodgers from the Eagles, and they brought in another low-risk, high-reward guy that I can't wait for Brian Flores to get his hands on in veteran corner Jeff Okudah, who was the 3rd overall pick back in 2020. Now, do I expect Okudah to have 6 or 7 interceptions and be a first-team All-Pro? Absolutely not, but I do like the idea of not just the Vikings, but really any team bringing in a former first-round pick to trust and enable their coaching staff to build a guy back up to where he was in his pre-draft process. They also brought in receiver Rondale Moore, who should be a good third option, and I'll be the first to admit that I don't expect Rondale to have anything more than 40, maybe 45 catches at the most, and obviously his production will naturally be limited by having Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and a healthy TJ Hawkinson in front of him. My biggest thing with the Vikings entering 2025 is they significantly improved their roster coming off of a year in which they won 14 games. I also think the Broncos, Buccaneers, Cardinals, and Titans all significantly improved their roster this offseason and certainly could have had a spot in today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video as well as subscribe to the channel, as liking the video helps with the YouTube algorithm tremendously, as well as comment down below who you think improved the most this offseason. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.